Welcome to WAMD. We are Motor Driven's podcast.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the We Are Motor Driven podcast. I'm Jennifer, and with me today we have...
Brendan Appel.
Paul Harold.
Harvey Briggs.
And that's who We Are Motor Driven is, just the four of us, a bunch of yahoos who love cars. So we thought in this first episode we would introduce you to who the heck we are and why we do what we do. And why not start with the sons, because there's two of them, so they outweigh Harvey and I by a 2-to-1 factor. Guys, how did that come to be?
I'll let Brendan start it out and I'll finish it up.
So we are Sons of Speed, and in 2015 we were a group of basically 3 friends who hit a lot of the circuit on track days. So we all had nice, fun sports cars. I had a Corvette C7 Stingray at the time. I remember that Chris had a Mustang Roush R2, and Paul had the Volvo, what was it again?
S60 R Design.
R Design, which doesn't sound like it would be
no.
us, but oh my God.
Oh my God.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. And if you know Paul, and if you sell tires, you really loved that Paul was driving that Volvo. He just drove the wheels off that thing. So we would go out and we would do all these fun track days, and we loved it. We just had so much fun driving these things, and we would make videos. And so we were doing a lot of video work just for the fun of it and just for our own entertainment. And after sitting down and talking after one of these track days, we're like, why don't we just do this as like a business? You know, there's got to be a market for maybe commenting on and showing people how we drive, or having fun at a track day, or reviewing some of these cars that we have. And that's how it all got started. And I'll let you talk about how we came up with the name.
Oh, yeah. So basically, all of our fathers were kind of in the car, not in the business, but at least were passionate about cars. So basically, my father was a drag racer for Dodge.
Oh, nice.
And then Brendan's father was like your museum guided tour of everything that there is to know about any piece.
Seriously.
So much useless knowledge about cars, but it was so awesome to go to a car show with him.
You ever see the movie My Cousin Vinny when she's talking about like the timing?
The pause
Brendan's father knew all about like which degree angle the timing should be and all that. That's kind of how he was. And then Chris's father he put cars together, basically. He's building his own custom stuff.
He built a 56 sidestep Chevy pickup truck with a 327 Corvette motor and a 4-speed Muncie Rock Crusher transmission.
Oh, my gosh.
And he had a 67 or 65, one of the 2 years, Barracuda that was his first car.
Seriously?
That he still had. Sadly, he just passed away. But,
oh, my gosh.
But yeah, and all of our fathers gave us this love of cars almost seemingly in our bloodstream, but really just through the experiences we all had with them. So going out to car shows with my dad that was the best, because it doesn't matter how obscure some car, like there would be like a Nash in the back that's like, you know, this tiny little 2-seat that he told me all about that car. And he would tell me all about the Studebaker over here that his dad had and how he learned on the Studebaker or this car. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter how obscure this car was, and no one had ever seen it before. My dad knew all about it. The stories about Paul's dad and his drag racing days with his aluminum. What was it? He had an aluminum-bodied something or other, which was way ahead of its time.
Dodge Challenger Hemi.
Yeah, and
seriously?
Yeah. I mean, they were, and then just hanging out with even just Chris's dad. We were rebuilding carburetors in his backyard on an old Yamaha motorcycle, and just everything that we did as kids growing up revolved around cars, involved something that having to do with the mechanical thing. Like, poor kids today really just don't have the same experiences, I think, that we got to do, which was...
you can't wrench on cars the same either.
No.
Yeah, because my father was always tinkering on cars and stuff. You can't do that today.
Oh, my gosh.
So can we give a shout out to the dads out there?
Oh, absolutely.
Seriously,
Yeah. Definitely have to for my dad, too.
Yeah, mine too. And he tinkered all the time, like Paul just said, but not in a good way.
No.
Right? Like my dad, we had what year was it? 86 or something, Buick LeSabre. that like my dad was so excited because he got this brand new vehicle, Sabre Limited, right? And there was a problem with the driver's side headlight, like it burned out, right? Mm-hmm. So according to him, you got to remove the whole headlight fairing. You got to take the whole thing out and replace it. And he started doing that before he went to buy a bulb, because all you had to do was like reach in and pull out this bulb. So there was duct tape on my dad's vehicle to hold the headlight in because he broke the thing that held it. It was terrible. So it wasn't the best wrencher in the world, but that's how my dad and I bonded.
But that's
was
how
cars.
weekend wrenching just kind of became a thing, is that you would start a 15-minute job and 4.5 hours later, you'd be like, I'm making your third trip to the parts store to fix whatever you broke.
There's always that mushroom effect when you work on a car. You know, you try to fix one thing, you got to fix 2 other things, and you break one
You
thing
break a
while you're
clip or
doing it.
something.
Right, no,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny because one of the best videos that we have as far as longevity, it just keeps getting repeat views over and over and over again. It's simply how to change the oil on a Z51 Corvette from 2015. That it was one of the first videos we did, and I was just like, hey, I'm going to figure out how to change the oil on this car. Why don't we shoot a video about it? I did, and it's just been like, it's the #1 how to change the oil on a C7 video. I think that's on YouTube right now. So
That's hilarious and awesome.
It was
it's
great.
cool.
So that's how we all got started. We looked with envy to some of the things that auto journalists got to do. They got to go to these rallies, we figured out, at places like Road America, one of our favorite tracks, and they got to drive cars for free and use other people's cars and other people's
and
brakes.
we're like, why are we paying for all this, right? So
Other people's tires and other people's
and
batteries.
tires and brakes and rotors and all that stuff. So we're
Tires
like,
and brakes and rotors, oh my.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
No, you don't realize how expensive all that stuff
Yeah.
is until, and then we didn't have to buy track insurance, and it was just like this amazing thing that we've discovered. So we're like, we're already doing the videos, and at that time, not a lot of places were doing videos. So when we got first into the Midwest Automotive Media Association, which is MAMA for short, they weren't really too excited to
they
welcome
were
us.
not happy
Because they're like,
that
"You don't
we-
write
You don't
articles?"
write articles? And we're like, no, we do videos. And they're like, well, I don't know
what's
about that.
Who
Yeah.
watches the video?
Yeah, who watches videos, right? So it took us a year to finally convince them
To let us in.
to let us in, and they finally did.
So I will touch on that. I've been a Mama member for a little longer than you guys, and Harvey's been one even longer. But I remember the first event you guys came to, and I can't remember what vehicle it was or something, but it was a launch of something. Just OEM was doing a thing, and here it is, and we get to look at it. And you guys walked in, and it was like, who and what? And I've been in TV for a while, so I get the video aspect of it, but it was like, how often do you hear of a brand new automotive outlet, coming out? And now they're kind of falling like flies, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But it was cool. To me, it was really cool that there was another group of guys that just loved cars coming in. I was excited.
And this year we celebrate our 10-year anniversary, so it's
Yes.
very cool.
Congratulations.
And one
guys.
thing I
That's
just
big.
want to add, which is people always find interesting, is where did we meet initially? Like, how do
Yeah.
I know Brendan? And it's a funny story.
Okay.
Okay, so his mother and my mother shared a room at a hospital where Brendan was delivered the day after my brother was delivered.
Okay.
So they became friends, because this is back in the day where you didn't have your own room. You had to kind of share rooms. So my mom and his mom became friends, and that's from that day forward, that's how I know Brendan. We've been friends since.
That's pretty
He's known me
awesome.
my whole life.
That's
Literally.
crazy.
Quite literally.
Like brothers.
That's pretty awesome. Brothers from another mother.
That's right.
I love that. Well, Sons of Speed, that's who you guys are. I
That's
love
who
it.
we are.
So Jen, tell
Yeah.
us about Auto Exotica
Oh, yeah.
and your path to this table.
So I've been a speed freak my whole life, right? And excuse me, back when I was in college, I got all the magazines. I was even getting European car magazines. And you all, listeners included, will remember when the Ferrari 550 Maranello came out.
Michael Jordan had one of those. I saw him driving it.
Michael Jordan had all the Ferraris.
I saw him specifically in that one, though.
That's cool. I was so stoked for this front engine V12 Ferrari to come out, So I literally waited. I had something like 8 or 10 car magazines a month I would get back then. This is the early 90s. And so I literally waited till all of them came. And then I remember specifically putting them out on my bed and opening to the opening spread of each one of the articles. And I was a little dismayed because every single one of these magazines had pretty much the same front quarter shot. They had a similar rear three-quarter shot. They had a driving shot, an interior shot, an engine shot, and maybe one or two other pictures. And I was like, huh. And these were not press shots. Like, they all went to a press launch in Italy. Consider me green with envy, right?
Yeah, right.
Because I know how these things work now. And they were flown there, they got fed, they got to drive this thing in the mountains on the track. And they all took the same freaking pictures.
You got the sense they were all standing in line and just like tick, click,
like,
and
here's
then
the
move
car
around.
Parked.
Yep.
You know, the backgrounds varied a little bit. So then I start reading. And literally it was like regurgitating the press kit. I was really just disheartened that this thing like didn't provide, none of these articles provided what I was really looking for. So the internet was becoming a thing, the interwebs going on the line, you know, AOL dial-up, all that stuff. And I had a good friend who worked at a marketing agency, and I came up with 10 somewhat leading questions, I will admit, but 10 questions about what do you want to see in a car magazine? And we put that out on the line for 30 days, and we had almost 10,000 responses. And like 90-some percent, 92% or something like that, wanted what I wanted, which was more pictures, better pictures, what we call a seat of the pants review. So an emotive review, not a technical review, but literally put me in the driver's seat, right? And then the baseball card facts, right? Horsepower, torque, kind of transmission, front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, whatever.
The all important 0 to 60.
No, the 0 to 60, the 0 to 100, and the
We'll
0 to
talk
100
about
0.
0 to 60 at
Yes,
some
we
point.
will.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was like, kind of lifted up thinking, there's other people out there like me who want what I want. So my dream had been, I'm gonna one day do a car magazine that delivers what I want, right? So I got out of college. I was in the service for a decade, and when I got out,
don't skip over that.
We will skip over that because it's not relevant.
It's relevant to speed.
It's speed.
It is
sure.
relevant.
It's whatever.
Speed and vehicle control.
Yeah. Okay.
I think.
So anyway, did that for a decade, and most people don't know this, but I studied music and education in college. So that's what I was studying. That's what my degrees are in. And my goal had been, I'm going to teach at a college from September through May, become some tenured professor, you know, teaching theory and composition and directing and all that. And then in the summers, I'm going to bop around the country taking pictures of really awesome sports cars. And I will put a magazine out quarterly. So I get home and I'm looking for a job, and a university was looking for a director of choral activities. And I was like, yes, the dream is coming true. And in the job requirements, it said ABD.
What does that mean?
Exactly. So I called, wound up talking to the head of the music department. We had a 45-minute, really fun, engaging conversation. I'm telling him my music experience because I've been involved since I was 15 years old in directing and music. And he's like, we can't wait to get your materials. You're definitely going to be on the list of interviewees. You know, this is perfect. Do you have any questions for me? I said, yeah. In your job requirements, it says ABD. Can you tell me what that means? He goes, oh, yeah, all but dissertation.
Okay.
Literally 30 seconds of dead air on the phone call. So you have a master's and you're working on your doctorates. You might not have written your dissertation yet. I have a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
Right? So he says, after literally like 30 seconds, you do have your master's, right? No. Dead air again. And I said, you won't even consider me, will you? And he's like, I'm sorry. If you send your stuff in, they'll just bin it, you know, right into the circular file. And I didn't feel like going back to college anymore at that point. So I actually got a job working for a publishing company, and we did brochures for the automotive industry. And so I got to do location scouting and photography and writing, you know, what was going to be in those brochures, and design and layout, like all of the aspects of that, everything pre-press. And then I was editor-in-chief of two aviation publications, so I could learn publishing from that side of things. And then in 2009, to get back to where this whole conversation started, we launched Auto Exotica in print. And it is a quarterly publication, or was until this year. Now it's an annual. Everything else is digital. Big changes are afoot because of the way the industry is right now, but we've done that for 16 years now. And
Well, congratulations.
thank you. And got involved with television as well. with a production called The Aviators, which, if there's any Aviators viewers out there, thank you for watching. It's the most watched aviation television show in history. Airs on PBS to the tune of about 12 million viewers a week, which is awesome. 8 seasons of that out there, and that's on PBS. And then we were approached, and because the show is doing so well, and asked, well, do you have an automotive outlet? No, not yet. And so we turned the magazine into a TV show. And so Auto Exotica TV is out there as well. And for you viewers, thank you so much, because we love making that show. And then during COVID, we launched The Median, which is an offshoot of AutoX, because Auto Exotica is all sports and high-end luxury cars. And I wanted to do the Honda Accords and the Toyota Corollas and, the things like that of the world, because I felt I was missing that piece of the thing. So we launched The Median. And that's been kind of quietly humming along. It's not a big outlet for us, but we get the viewers or the readers in the newsletters and on the website. So yeah, that's the gestation of Auto Exotica, and probably bored you guys at home listening to this. So stay tuned
not at
for
all,
Harvey
not at all.
Briggs and his tale of automotive excitement.
Well, we'll see how exciting it is. Like you guys, I owe my passion for automobiles to my father, who never turned a wrench in his life, but was madly in love with cars. His actual first job out of college was in marketing for Ford.
Ooh, seriously.
And his first project was launching the Edsel.
Oh,
So he quickly
interesting.
decided that automotive and marketing was not his strength, and he went back to school and got a degree and became a stockbroker, but never lost his passion for automobiles. So when I was 8 years old and he pulled into the driveway with a Guards red Porsche 911,
nice.
I was smitten as an 8-year-old kid. And it wasn't too long before I could see over the dash and started doing my own risky business and taking the Porsche out for little drives when he wasn't watching. I think he left the keys out on purpose, but and then
What
in,
a good dad.
in 1971 he became a part owner. Actually, he really was a patron for a Trans Am race team. The two drivers were Tony DiLorenzo and Jerry Thompson, who were both Daytona endurance champion racers. These guys were great. We bought a couple of Bud Moore Mustangs. The team was called Troy Promotions Racing, and in 1971, I went to every Trans Am race as an 11-year-old kid and saw George Fulmer and Mark Donahue and Peter Revson and all these guys. And, when you're hearing the V8s thundering at that age and smelling the Castrol, it never leaves you. So, I've always been a car, motorcycle, whatever guy. And then when I got into college, Car and Driver magazine moved from New York to Ann Arbor. And I was at the University of Michigan, and I got introduced to David E. Davis Jr., who was kind enough to offer me the job as intern at the magazine, which I did
Sweet.
for 4 years because I wasn't
long
giving
internship.
I was not giving that internship up. What was I going to do? Go work in a clothing store at Orange Julius? No, thank you.
Right.
So I worked at the magazine for 4 years and did everything from washing cars to writing a few articles, which was great. And that really set me on the path to becoming a writer. And but then when I graduated, Car and Driver didn't have a full-time position. David, who had been in the advertising business, said, have you ever thought about advertising? And I said, no. And he said, well, you might be good at it. Made a few phone calls, and next thing I knew, I was working in the Detroit advertising business doing ads. The first agency I worked for was called Darcy McManus and Macius, and we had Pontiac and Cadillac as our two accounts. So I did ads for Trans Ams and all that kind of stuff, which was pretty cool. And and I worked in the Detroit ad business for about 10 years. Eventually, at one point, I was head of motorsports advertising for Chevrolet, so got to do a lot of fun shoots at Indy and Daytona, and we actually did a really cool TV commercial once, and we had to shoot it on the 4th of July because that was the only, or the 3rd of July, because it was the only day that none of the teams were busy
Oh, geez.
that year. And we got one of every Chevrolet race car from all the North American race series
Wow.
to Mid-Ohio. And we shot all the, drag racers, Trans Am, Indy cars, off-road race trucks, all that stuff. And we had all the crew chiefs together. We had all the cars together. And these guys are just pouring over each other's cars. Oh, look at the suspension on that. How do you do that? It was just this great moment of, something that my career had taken me to. And it was really cool. And so I worked in Detroit until about 1990. And I don't know if you remember what the Detroit automobile business was like in 1990, but there's a reason they call it the malaise era.
Yeah, for
There
sure.
was some pretty bad stuff going on. And so I had been working on the Chevrolet account, and I, launched a few vehicles, and they took me out to Arizona to look at the next car I was going to help them launch, and pulled back the curtain, and there is the Caprice of the late 80s.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, you know what? I can't help you anymore. I gotta go. And that car didn't speak to me. And so
Didn't speak to a lot of people.
yeah, so I decided to try something different. I moved out of Detroit and was actually partner in my own advertising agency for about 15 years. And then after running a business, I realized, God damn it, I hate not writing, and I want to write more. And so I sold my part of the business, went on my own, freelance, and a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, you're an automotive guy, right? Would you like to handle reviews for my website? And it was called Pursuitist.com, which is a luxury lifestyle website, kind of competes with Rob Report. And so all of a sudden, I was writing luxury automotive reviews. I was, Rolls-Royce. One of the first loans I ever got from a press loan was a Bentley Continental GT Speed.
Nice.
So that's a good way to be introduced
That's
to
nice
the
way to go down from there. Really.
Yeah,
Nice
that's a bad place to start. 'Cause
Exactly.
Like you said,
So-
where are you going to go?
Yeah, so it was, all of a sudden I'm going on these press trips, and a lot. I don't know if people listening all know about these press trips, but these are like the craziest boondoggles ever. And they send you a plane ticket, or now on the app, and fly you to someplace cool, and you drive a great car. So I'm doing these press trips with Lexus and BMW and Rolls-Royce and others, and it was really cool. But I'm a car guy. I'm not a luxury guy. So at some point it was like, I need to get back into more mainstream stuff. And living in Madison, Wisconsin, there's not a lot of editorial outlets, there. So I said, well, start my own and see what happens. And so about 9 years ago, I started Rides and Drives to do all different types of reviews. And one of the things that you said, Jen, that's really, I think, speaks to me is the idea of these reviews are about how the car makes you feel.
Yeah.
Right? It's not specs and numbers and all that. Yeah, we'll talk about some of the features, but it's really about what's this car for, what's it good at, who should be driving this car, how will it make you feel when you get behind the wheel. And those are the things that I like about writing, and that's really what I learned from the guys at Car and Driver back in the late 70s and early 80s was, how can you, this was a magazine that when I was there hired PJ O'Rourke to write reviews for them, So it wasn't about traditional cars or car expertise. It was entertainment and the information. And so that's what I'm trying to provide with Rides and Drives.
And that's really what Sons of Speed aims for too, right? Like how do you wring the performance, right, guys, out of a minivan?
Yeah. I mean, our tagline is redline your soul.
Yeah.
And that is what we are trying to determine with every review. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a minivan for all we care, but it's, drive this thing, kind of try to drive the wheels off of it, see what it does. Does it give you something in return that really kind of stirs your soul?
Yeah.
So is there some aspect of this vehicle, whether it's acceleration, whether it's the way it handles a turn, whether it's incredible braking performance, something about it that's just going to be like, even if I have to drive something that I'd rather be driving a sports car, but I have to drive a family sedan, for example.
Yeah.
Which sedan out there would be the one that you can secretly sort of enjoy driving while
Right.
the rest of the family is just like, oh, look how nice this thing is and how much room it has. And, oh, look at this beautiful sunroof. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And companies like, for example, Mazda, I think really kind of grasp that, where they know that the guy who's driving probably wants to be sitting in a sports car, but he's got a family, so he's going to be in this SUV. So, let's try to give him something that he's going to enjoy driving. And other manufacturers do that as well, but I think Mazda's kind of like that's their ethos, where they really try to put a lot of the fun into
Zoom,
driving.
baby.
Zoom, exactly. Zoom. Yeah, so
And I will interject. And the moms taking the kids to soccer may want to have a little fun too.
you
I'm
never
just
know.
There you go.
Yes,
I'm just saying.
there you go.
True.
There you go.
Heading to the grocery store, I'm going to get there as fast as possible.
Yes.
I'm going to fill up as many bags as possible and get home as fast as possible.
Right. Well, that's how you end up with vehicles like the Durango, SRT 392, or the top of the line with the 6.4 supercharged Hemi, which we've driven on Road America and has been just blows our mind how good that vehicle is.
I just saw Grand Cherokee Trackhawk yesterday
Oh, yeah.
on
Yeah.
the highway, and it doesn't look that ostentatious. You tell from the sound.
Yeah.
And the
Oh,
windows
yeah.
were up, but I heard this kind of, and I was
Yeah.
like, Trackhawk.
Yeah. And
I remember taking the Trackhawk to the car wash, and the guy saying, "Nope, can't take that through here. The wheels were too
Yep.
wide."
Yeah, I wonder about that sometimes. Some of the vehicles that because we all get press cars, right? And so some of them do have pretty wide tires. And
Ford Raptor R.
yeah,
When I had that,
probably can't go through
I
that.
drove around this whole area looking at the 5 different car washes that I normally use, and it wouldn't fit in any one of them.
Yeah, I believe it.
Not a single one.
No.
And how many magazines have explained that to their readers?
I think 1 or 2 here or there. And I don't
okay.
want to discourage, any other outlet out there. You're doing your thing, and that's fantastic because there's a place for everything, right? But I think this is why this We Are Motor Driven group came to be just a few years ago. Listeners out there, we decided to get together and put our websites all in one space so you can go get all of our opinions sort of at one time. We may all get the same press car throughout the course of a summer or a year, but all our reviews are going to be different. All of our opinions are going to be different. And if you read those, you're going to be like, oh, this car might work for me, or truck might work for me, or it might not, because you're going to get that, emotion side of things here that I think we tend to focus on. So
That's what we all kind of revolved around. And the reason why we all came together is because we all do try to give you the emotion we are feeling and that this vehicle gives off when you're driving it. And we'll let you know if this thing is just soulless and dead inside and it won't do anything for you in that respect. But we will
but it might
also
serve other purposes.
could serve. It would definitely, is it an appliance?
Not everybody loves cars. You're
Right.
probably not listening to this podcast if you don't love cars.
If you are, hey, we love you, thanks.
The average buyer, God forbid, couldn't tell the difference between a CVT and a 9-speed automatic
Point A to
transmission.
point B
but
user.
They will, but for us, a CVT rips the soul out of a car.
God.
Right?
Every single
Every-
way.
every
Yeah.
way.
Probably more than anything else that you can do to a car. That CV. Oh wow, there's some CVT stories.
Which does bring up another topic we really wanted to discuss today. Our favorite cars we've owned. Forget the press cars for a minute, because I think this tells listeners who we are as people more than anything else. What have we owned? And there's a common thread between you three that I don't share. Unfortunately, I wish I did own one back in the day.
You should
and
buy
it
one
is
now.
the what?
But
Eagle Talon TSI all-wheel drive.
Yep.
Manual.
6-speed.
Yes. Actually, it was a 5-speed.
A 5-speed.
five-speed,
Yeah.
yes.
Mine might have been. No, I
They-
can't. I had the
I
93.
think you still had the.
I had the
93 is
90.
Still 5.
I had the
yeah, still
1990.
5-speed.
So Paul had a 90.
I had a 91.
Brendan,
Paul's
91.
and I's would look like clones because we were black with the gray, they faded to gray at the bottom.
yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
And you had the
Headlights.
pop-up headlights, right?
Yeah,
We
automatic
had
seat
pop-up
belts.
headlights. Yeah.
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 Harvey
the
had a
seat belts
93.
that would be on that track.
Oh,
It
the
was-
track
Oh,
belts.
it's
yes.
That's the worst part about that car, but
Pre-airbags.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pre-airbags. Yeah.
Yes, pre-airbags.
Yeah, and I had the 93, which didn't have pop-up headlights, but
But it shared the body style though.
yeah, very
Yeah,
similar,
yeah.
just a slight different design. Maybe it was a little bit more organic in shape, but it was that was a car that I mean, I had just moved to Madison. I wasn't beholden to Detroit, even though it was technically a Detroit car.
Built in Illinois.
Illinois.
Normal Illinois.
It was that Chrysler Mitsubishi partnership.
Yep.
Diamond Star Motors.
Just let me interject here. It was the exact same car as the Mitsubishi Eclipse.
Yeah.
Correct.
And the
GSX,
Plymouth Laser.
And the Plymouth Laser.
Right. But Eagle had the all-wheel drive.
Well, the GSX on the Mitsubishi
Mitsubishi had one
did
top
line
as well.
Mitsubishi had
However,
as well.
the Talon had the extra differential in the back.
Right. So there you go. So we all had this car, and I bought it because it was all-wheel drive, so I could sneak it past the gatekeeper at my house about needing a sports car.
I love
But this
that
morning,
car.
before we started, you said it, Paul. You said it was this. You're still your like second
My
favorite
second
car
favorite
you've
car
ever
I've ever
owned.
had. Yes.
Okay, and Brendan, you've talked about this car so many times
Oh,
over the
gosh.
few years we've known each other that it's
Yeah.
got to be your top three.
It's definitely top 3. I wish I never sold the car. The
Me too.
funny story about my car specifically, I bought it used. It had 6,000 miles on it. I was actually with your brother Paul when I bought it, and because of your car, so I wanted one. Found one used. And it was hard to find a good one used
Right.
because the second gear synchros in that car
Yeah, that was the
were
biggest
just
problem.
Beat to everybody was power shifting that thing. So to find one that didn't grind into second gear was actually hard. I found one. It was awesome. I bought it and I drove it for many years. And when it got to about, 70, 80,000 miles, I had gotten engaged. I might have even been married at the time. And it was kind of like time to move on. And the car started having some issues. I replaced the clutch in it once. That was more on my driving style. But anyway, traded it in for an Eldorado. A Cadillac Eldorado, which my sister made so much fun of me because I used to play a lot of golf and drive an Eldorado. She's like, "What are you, 80 years old?" Like, so
I think he's done.
So the
Brendan, you're done.
No,
Sorry,
no. So
cut
the
his
car
mic.
was the funny thing about the car. It was sitting at the lot at the Cadillac dealership, and my brother ends up buying. Oh no, actually, they sold it to somebody else. That person traded it back to the Cadillac dealership. Then my brother bought the same exact car. And I know it was the same car because it had different wheels on it that it came with. And so he ended up owning the same car. He drove it till I think he killed it. But yeah, it was very that thing stayed in our family for a while. And I wish I still had it. It was such a great car.
Yeah, my favorite car I've ever owned, and I'm from a different generation from you guys, so it's a 1967 Volvo 1800.
Oh, my parents had one of those.
I
It was
had
awesome.
it for, it's the car I've owned the longest. I had it for 12 years. I bought it, I actually found it on the streets of Manhattan with a for sale sign on it for $1,200. I called the number, the guy came down, I wrote him a check right there and drove the car from Manhattan to Madison.
Wow. How was his drive? Was it made it fine?
It was in need of a lot of work. I basically rescued that thing. It was starting to rust. There were none of the gauges worked. And when I got stuck in a traffic jam, it started to overheat. And all this stuff was as I was driving it home because it was summer. But then I restored it and loved it, and I just love that body style.
It is so
it's
pretty.
Such a pretty
Looks
car.
What was the
nice.
show? Is it The Saint?
The Saint,
Yeah.
and mine was white with a red interior, so
Oh
very
my
similar to
gosh.
the car.
I would
in
love
that.
to do
And-
a resto mod on one of those.
Yeah, they're a great car for that because they're just built, so you can do a lot to them. That original motor was basically, it was a Climax tractor motor, so you couldn't break the thing, and it was a lot of fun, and a car that everyone always wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And it handled like crap. It was slow, but it was beautiful. And,
Absolutely
and
gorgeous.
so for me, that is the one car that I find it needed another full restoration, and I was like, I can't do another one, so
Yeah.
I sold it to someone else to let them do it.
So if you don't know what that looks like, go Google it right now. It's really a pretty car.
Yeah,
and-
Volvo P1800
Yeah,
is so
P1800 is-
sexy.
Yeah, Jen.
Well, I actually did this last night. I made my car history list.
Oh,
Oh my
Every
gosh.
car I've
We just
owned.
spent
How
5
many
hours on
hours
it.
do we have?
It was a while. It took a minute. We all love our first car, right? Your very first car, because it's freedom.
I didn't.
I
well,
did.
mine was a 1978 Ford Econoline full-size van with a 351 Windsor.
Nice.
And I loved it. It was not a good car.
Yeah,
But I
okay.
loved it. And I still do. Like, it's one of those I wish I could find. you know,
Right.
and like buy it back. I'm sure it's a box of metal somewhere that's been turned into Coke cans or I don't know. But my first sports car was a 1993 300ZX twin turbo.
Nice.
Yeah,
Good choice.
Beautiful
T-top,
car.
manual,
Oh,
black.
yeah.
And I bought it. It saved a bunch of money. I bought this car. It was when the luxury tax came out, and luxury tax was like a high percentage, anything over I think $32,000. Might have been 30,000, but I think it was like $32,000, something like that. And the car was right around there. And this is the first year of production, so they dropped it down for me, so I'd have to pay luxury tax. And like a year later, dealers were like asking over MSRP for it, and then people were paying luxury tax on top of it. Like, and that's the one like really wish I still had that car. For the first season of Auto X, we worked with Nissan and got to pull cars out of the museum. And I got to pull that car out of the museum. Not my specific car, but we got to drive one. And it just was like flooding of memories of like how good this car really was, you know? And
That's really why I don't know that I would love to own my old Talonback or a one like it, but I would just love to drive one for a day again.
Yep.
Just there should be a place. It's a good business opportunity for somebody. Just collect a bunch of these old cars and just rent them out to people our age that
That's a
just
good
want to
idea.
have some nostalgia,
Sentimental value.
Yeah, just I just want to.
I
Drive
got
that
emotional.
Car again.
And I just started driving the car on Natchez Trace Parkway.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you've ever been in Tennessee, just this gorgeous, winding, beautiful, smooth pavement.
Oh yeah,
like,
that
you know,
episode
butter.
is beautiful to watch.
Yeah, and I'm just rolling through the gears, not even pushing it. It's just like everything. It was all driver centric, you know, all the knobs at the end, and it's just titanium key, you know, like everything about that came flooding back. So
That
good.
car had one of the best commercials ever. There was a Ridley Scott commercial.
The one with G.I. Joe and Barbie.
I don't remember. No, it was the one about the dream. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
So it's
With
like,
the-
last night I had this dream. I was being chased by some.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah.
That's a good commercial. But if you haven't seen the G.I. Joe Barbie one,
Oh no.
I think that's a superior commercial. Like G.I. Joe jumps in this 300Z and drives over to like Barbie's dream house, and there's Ken chilled with Barbie, and Barbie sees G.I. Joe in this car.
gonna go for
And
the
she
bad
walks
boy.
away
She
with
jumps Ken.
It's incredible.
That's great.
Yeah, so if you haven't ever seen that Nissan Barbie Ken G.I. Joe commercial, please go watch that. It's just so fun. It's so entertaining. It's just, and Mr. K appears at the end.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate because nobody makes car ads like that anymore. It's so sad.
You know the funny thing about that ad, having just pulled it up and scrubbed through it, I remember this thing. It might be the first car ad to use a toy or a series. In this case, it's like Toy Story before Toy Story was Toy Story.
Yep.
And use it.
Got
Yeah, I got it. So to use toys in a car ad, and I remember that Lexus did the same thing with the RC, which they were
right,
doing
yeah.
the radio controlled
That's right.
RC,
Yeah.
and they sort of spliced in the real car at the end.
That's
and this
right.
one is all toys.
All toys, yep.
And it's hilarious. It's really good. But that this one and plus the Ridley Scott. I mean, where is the automotive advertising that was like this?
We're going to have to do an episode.
That's going to
on
be a
that.
whole separate
Yeah.
episode
Yeah.
for sure.
I'll
That's just
dig
a
back
teaser.
into my advertising background and we can talk about
yeah.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely would love to do that.
See? So you
Okay.
make sure you subscribe to this podcast because you are going to get some cool
You're going to get
content
some good
coming
stories.
up.
So 300ZX, probably one of my top 3 favorite cars that I've owned. You guys have seen the list. It's been all over the gamut, and it's a problem. I'm an addict. I'm a car addict. Hello, my name is Jennifer.
I think
and I'm an
after
addict.
22,
No.
I stopped reading.
Did
Hold
you?
on.
Okay.
Jennifer's not an addict. She suffers from a condition called the car owner virus.
COV.
The car owner virus.
Oh God,
She's
Brendan
been infected.
with his corny jokes.
Okay, all right. That's a dad joke, Brendan.
Yes, it is.
So forget about our favorite cars we've owned. What did you learn to drive on?
That's a good one.
You know?
So for me, my first car that I learned to drive on what ended up being my first car was it wasn't a Fiat because Fiat had stopped importing cars into the U.S. in 1984. So it was a Bertone. He said it. We have a podcast guest who's gonna pronounce that correctly. Maybe Paul can correct it, but it's X19 was the model.
Bertone.
Bertone.
Bertone X19.
Little 2-seat sports car, 5-speed
Door
manual.
stopper.
Yes, it looked like a wedge door
Looked
stopper.
like a wedge door stopper.
Pop-up headlights, all manual everything. Manual steering, manual brakes, manual transmission. There was the only thing that had power was automatic windows, which decided when they wanted it to work, and they didn't.
It's Italian.
It's still Italian.
Semi-automatic windows.
It overheated when it got in traffic, like the 1800. So, but man, what a phenomenal car! I grinded gears, I popped clutches, but
That's the car you learned to drive in?
that's the car I learned to
Was
drive
the
in.
wedge.
It was the size of a go-kart. I mean,
Yeah?
this thing was, and it drove like a go-kart. But that's that's why I have it in my blood. That's what I learned to drive on.
How old were you?
I was 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you drive at anything before that?
The only other thing I drove was my mom's Eagle Premier. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
I do remember the Eagle Premier.
The most bland, boring style of car. Yes, it was.
It was all right.
It was
thing.
their version of the Mitsubishi Diamante, right?
Yeah.
Or
Right.
whatever it was.
Well, both of my
like that.
parents are gone now, so I can tell this story. But that car beat a 79 Camaro V8 in drag racing up and down Palatine Road, after which, though, it gave up its front axle and maybe the transmission. But both were under warranty. But they kept asking me, what did you do to this car? And
Who
I
was
said,
driving when that happened,
that
Brendan?
would be me.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought.
But yeah, so his brother was in the car, egging me on to do it.
Of course.
That
It was
sounds like
Paul's
my
brother's
brother.
Yes,
fault.
it was.
Paul's brother's fault.
But yeah, so they would constantly ask me like, "What did you do to the car?" I didn't do anything to the car. I was just driving it, and then all of a sudden, it just some big noise happened, and it wouldn't go anywhere. So yeah, but it was surprisingly quick.
Okay. All right, but you learned on the wedge,
But I learned on the 85 horsepower,
which is a
wedge.
manual transmission.
It was a manual transmission.
Awesome. Paul?
Okay, so under my learner's permit, I drove my mom's BMW 528i.
Yeah.
But then when I got my first vehicle was a 1981, so it was about 7 years used.
Okay.
Volkswagen Rabbit. Not the GTI, just
Okay, just a
regular.
Rabbit.
Manual?
Yes, manual 4-speed.
Oh, nice.
And
Yeah, mine was a 5-speed, so I didn't mention that earlier, but yes.
yeah, it had nothing power at all. But it was, I remember this, it did have a sunroof, but with a crank.
Oh, yeah. I remember
Yeah.
those.
So that was interesting. And I think my father put more money into getting it to work than what he had paid for it.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so it was.
And everyone listening needs to know that if you're younger and you're used to ABS, none of these cars that
Not
we're
a
talking
one of
about had analog
Oh,
brakes.
yeah. So my first snowstorm in that car, I remember hitting the brakes really hard, and I did like a 180 immediately.
Oh, I did several in the X19.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So you kind of learned a little bit on your mom's
Yes,
BMW.
hers was an automatic.
Okay.
And then when I turned 16, my father came home with this baby blue
Oh, nice.
Volkswagen Rabbit, and I don't know how many miles I had on it, but and he says, "Okay, so the next morning you're gonna drive to school." I've never driven a manual,
Okay.
and this was his instructions. Okay, you want to balance the gas and the clutch. Go.
Well, it wasn't wrong.
Gee, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, but there's a lot more.
there's a little more to it.
that.
But he wasn't
than-
wrong.
Oh my God, the screaming and yelling.
I'm sure.
Well, I made it though. I made it
Yeah?
to school, and the way back was.
Did the clutch make it to school?
Yes, it did. The way back was no better. And then I just said to my dad, I said, you know what? You stay home. I'm just going to drive around the block.
Yeah.
And just did it on my own, and
Much
within a couple of hours, it was all good.
Nice. Harvey, what about you?
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, I had a interesting. I started riding and driving go-karts and mini bikes and all of that when I was about 8 or 9 years
Okay.
old. So I was, kind of learning about how vehicles work when I was tiny. But the car I really learned to drive in was a 1974 International Harvester Scout 2 with a 4-cylinder engine and a 3-speed manual transmission.
Wow.
And the fun part was when I started driving that when I was about 14.
Okay.
We lived in northern Michigan at the time, and my sister, who was older, loved, we had a boat, and we used to go out on the boat all the time, but she hated driving the car with the boat on the back. So
Okay.
I was the guy driving the boat to the boat ramp
Gotcha.
at 14 years old, backing the thing up and putting it in and all this.
Nice.
And my parents,
Nice.
and people are like, I could barely even see over the damn thing. I'm sure I
Seesaw
looked like
that
I
wheel
was
back and
12.
forth?
Yeah, giant steering wheel.
Yeah.
But that was really the car I learned. And then I kept stealing my dad's Porsche, and
Yeah.
I was gone from them. So these were all manual transmission cars. My brother came home with a '69 Camaro RS, so I used to drive that a lot. That was
Oh,
a 327 with
Glad we're not filming this
327.
because
with
I'm
a
drooling
with a
right
Hurst
now.
seriously.
4-speed in it.
You're
And
killing us, man.
so we had a lot of fun cars when I was a kid, and that's why my automotive influences come from that era.
Well, Harvey, the Scout name
I
is
know.
coming back.
On an electric vehicle.
Sadly not a
but I've been
three-speed manual,
talking
but-
to those guys because of my history with the car, and we may be able to talk about that on this podcast
Yeah,
at some
I'm sure we
point.
will.
Excellent.
Sometime soon. Well, I learned on that very same vehicle that was my first car. However, I was 10, So just a little bit quick aside here. We had this full-size 40 Econoline van for my brother. My brother had muscular dystrophy, so we had a wheelchair lift in the side. It was back when vans only had one door. It was on the passenger side sliding door. And so that was our family vehicle. We had a couple 100,000 miles on that by the time it became mine. Like actual, and still original engine, not the same transmission, definitely not the same brakes. But we would go, so I grew up in northern Illinois, and my grandparents had a cabin in northern Wisconsin. So that's where we would vacation every summer, 2 weeks up in Tomahawk. And my dad, like I said, and I bonded over cars. So driving into town was these 2-lane, not even marked yellow line, just 2-lane sort of blacktop, snakes that went through the woods, heavy north woods of Wisconsin. And driving to town would be a 20 to 30 minute drive. And my dad, when I was 10, let me sit on his lap and steer.
Nice.
Right?
Good dad.
And good dad, very good dad. And
The seatbelts weren't a thing back then.
seatbelts didn't matter. So I did that for a few years, and then I was 14 and I was 6'2", so I couldn't sit on my dad's lap anymore. And so my dad's like, "Well, I'm just going to let you drive." And I was like, "Rock on, Dad, thanks." So I had no trouble reaching the pedals or anything, but you're 14 years old, and there's a straightaway, and you've got full control. So I'll never forget, stomping on the gas pedal, bringing it up to the 45-mile-an-hour posted speed limit, and we're approaching about a 45-degree turn. And my dad doesn't say anything, and I'm still cruising. Pretty soon he goes, "Brake!" like super loud. Full stop about halfway in, but that was probably after I lifted the right rear wheel because it was a right turn. And we had a wheelchair lift on that side, several
yeah.
100 pounds.
That's when Jennifer learned about vehicle dynamics.
That's right, vehicle dynamics, all in one lesson. But my brother unfortunately passed away when he was 19. I was 14 and a half. He passed away that winter. And the van just kind of sat. We donated the lift to another family because they're not inexpensive. And I eventually, when I got my license, wound up with that van, and that's what got me through high school. And the first, I will say, one other quick story before I wrap this up. The first about 6 months driving that van were very interesting because we had heavy-duty truck shocks on the passenger side to account for the lift.
Yeah.
I could turn left with never slowing down. If I had to turn right, I had to walk. And finally, I just told my dad, this is not safe. So we took the right front and put it on the left rear. So then I basically had like a, Papa Wheelie kind of van. But it was great for the high school vehicle, right? It's two-tone green, rust all around the bottom. Most of the time it ran, but my dad would come rescue me every now and again from school because it wouldn't start or whatever, and we'd have to figure out what was wrong with it. That's what a first car should be.
Oh yeah. The Rabbit was just like that.
Yeah.
Many
Yeah.
won't start moments.
The youth
Yeah.
of this era do not understand how awesome the parking lot at school was in probably starting in the even the 70s and 80s, but the 80s for sure when I grew up. I mean, that parking lot was the place to be. There were so many cool cars, and none of them were expensive.
None of them were new.
No, and you go by I go by my old high school now, and everyone's got a Range Rover, a BMW. They're all brand new, Broncos and Jeeps, and I'm like, this is not the same. This is not the same parking
Yeah,
lot.
my
it
kids
was.
did not have the same experience. They were on my lap driving when they were young. I really wanted them to have that experience, but no, we spoiled our kids. They both had the same first car. I had bought a 2006 Kia Spectra to take me to and from my job up in Iola, Wisconsin, which is 65 miles one way, so 130 miles round trip. And all I did was log miles in this car. That was both our kids' first car. You had to prove you could drive before you got something else. Then they were spoiled after that.
Yeah.
So
Well, this has been a lot of fun.
it has
Getting
been.
to know more about each of us.
And if you were having fun, make sure you hit the subscribe button and maybe throw us a comment. What was your first car is what I want to know.
Yeah.
And you got any cool stories of that experience? Because that's really what kind of set us all off, I think. It's just those first experiences with cars, around cars, driving cars. And apparently you're all sons of speed
That's
at
right.
this table. So,
And daughters.
and yes, sons of, well, I use that in the inclusive manner. If I say car guy, I just no,
I
I
know.
just mean it the most inclusive manner.
It's car
possible.
guys. I get it. And I am a car guy at heart.
You are a car guy at heart.
Yep. So yeah, thanks so much for listening to this very first episode of the We Are Motor Driven podcast. Please do give us a like and subscribe, and let us know what was your first car. And until next time, we'll see ya.